Brooklyn, New York. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Hank. Thank you for taking my call.
Pleasure.
All right. I had a question, and there's actually a second question to it, but it's all under the same subject. Basically, the question is a lifetime jail sentence grounds for divorce, even with the vows for better or for worse and conjugal visits?
Well, that's a hard question to answer, but let me give the answer to you in principle. First of all, let me emphasize the radical concept of marriage. Christians must reconcile themselves to this notion, and that is God's call to holiness in marriage trumps their own pursuit of happiness. So if that's in your mind, or in the front of your mind, it ends up trumping a lot of hypothetical situations. But having said that, there are, I think, circumstances that rise to the same level as adultery and willful desertion, which are irreparable violations of covenant love. In other words, there are sins against marriage that could rise to the same level of covenant unfaithfulness as the two exceptions that we have in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 and Matthew chapter 19. And that could be a whole list of things, including unrepentant addiction to pornography, engagement in the occult, spiritual actions that are harmful to the family. All of these could be argued are violations of the marriage covenant and therefore biblical grounds for divorce, even though they're not specifically named in the New Testament. But rather than simply making a knee-jerk reaction on these kinds of things, it's important to get biblical counsel with regard to specific circumstances. It took 4 people to get into a marriage, or 4 parties. It took a husband, it took a wife, it took the state, and it took the church. And I think to break the covenant vow, to actually divorce in the secular arena, requires counsel from the church, and it requires being on your knees as a husband and a wife, because this is one of the most serious issues imaginable in the Christian world. We're talking about the rendering asunder of a family that is the unit of society, inviolate in the eyes of God, critical to the fabric of civilization, and therefore we cannot take these things lightly. Divorce is always a function of the hardness of human hearts. And that is why there was a writ of divorce given in the first place. It was because of the hardness of the human heart. And we are called as believers not to look for escape clauses, but rather to commit ourselves to marriage. That's the whole point. If you look at the grounds given in the Bible for divorce, they're given within a context where men are putting away women for any or every reason. And as a result, women became chattel, property of men. And the Bible within that context says, no, that's not the way God intended it to be. As a result of biblical principles that make women ontologically equal to men, Western society formed, as it were, the most powerful females in the history of humanity because they followed the biblical principles and priorities. Today, unfortunately, many of those same women are walking back into shackles under the guise of liberation, which is not liberation indeed. We'll be right back with more of The Biz. Anthony, listening on WCR.